Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Open Book. I am Billy Price. I am one of the two co-founders of Billy Footwear, and for those out there that this is your first episode of Open Book, you are in for a sincere treat. First off, I absolutely love Open Book because it's kind of a play on words. We as a brand, we are an open book. We'll talk about anything. But secondly, if you've noticed the way our shoes work, the zipper on the outside of the shoe goes around the toe, so the whole upper opens up. So it literally kind of opens up like a book. And we are storytellers. And when you step into your shoes and you flip that over, you're kind of stepping into your own story. And every time you step in and you zip up your shoes, it's a new chapter to start your day. But that all aside, we also love to share the program with our amazing guests. So today we are absolutely honored. We have Patrick Donohue. He is the founder and CEO of iBRAIN. He is the founder and chairman of iBRAIN, as well as the founder and chairman of Liberty and Freedom Legal Group. Patrick, thank you so much for coming to Open Book.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Patrick, there are so many things that I want to ask you. And as I said right before this call here, your family's world has been on a bit of a roller coaster. It's been a very, in ways, very public story. It's been shared on national platforms like the Today Show, through huge magazines. There's been a lot of, doctors and such focused in on your story. But I think the root, the very beginning, I think a great place to start would be to tell us and share with our audience, who is Sarah Jane?
Well, Sarah Jane is my 19-year-old daughter. Her second day of preschool, she was labeled with the term diva, and she's lived up to that label ever since. My job as Sarah Jane's dad is to change the world for her, and that's basically the mission that I'm on. Sarah Jane, when she was 5 days old, she was shaken by her baby nurse, broke 4 ribs, both collarbones, and caused a severe brain injury. She's 19 now. While she's nonverbal and ambulatory, she can't walk on her own or speak words. One day she will. And my job is to change the world for her. And that's kind of the mission that I've been on ever since. She's an amazing, hardworking, delightful young lady. And that's my role as Sarah Jane's dad.
When I was reading up on your story in preparation for this call, part of it was touching on, in that moment when we started looking at the brain, it became apparent, at least the way I was understanding it, it became apparent that our understanding of the brain was so incredibly limited. And it seemed like what I was reading, there wasn't enough effort going into learning on how the brain functions or whatnot. And that's when the fire in your belly kind of, started burning bright to lean in to try to do something about it. So can you share?
Sure. So the first instance that obviously when this first happened, it was obviously quite a bit of a fog, but I'll never forget when we brought her back into the hospital about a week or so later, because we didn't know what was happening and she was deteriorating. We brought her back into the hospital and she was 2 weeks old, and we brought her in. And at the time, there were a couple of nurses that were trying to get an IV into her. And I'll never forget the moment where they just couldn't get the IV in, and I was staring at her, and she was laying there with her mouth wide open and tears dropping down her face. And it dawned on me at that point in time, because of her injury, she couldn't scream. And it was at that moment that she wanted to scream, but I realized at that moment in time that it was my job as her dad to be her voice. And that's certainly a moment that clicked in for me. And then about a year later, as I was getting out of this fog and taking care of the daily routine of Sarah Jane, I started to, I'll never forget, she was doing belly time, and her legs were kicking, while she was doing belly time. And it just dawned on me, I'm like, this little bugger wants to crawl. I mean, she's a year old. So I went up and I got a dolly, and I put a towel over the dolly, put her torso on the dolly, and her legs were dangling off of it. And she started moving around the floor with this dolly, and she was excited. and obviously I then build onto that. And weeks later, I'm walking around with her. As I said, she can't walk on her own, but I was basically going and sitting down with her. And every time I sat down with her, she would start getting upset. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what's going on here? I'm like, I didn't do anything but sit down. Then it dawned on me, she's basically saying, get up, fatty. I can't walk. You need to get up and move around for me. And that's when I went and created a walker for her out of piping and a gait train and I created my own gait trainer using a walker. And that's when it really started clicking me that I needed to do more. So I started research as much as I could on neuroplasticity, neuroinformatics, anything in my hands on about the brain. I could humbly admit I only understood about 10% when I was reading. What I realized, though, at the time was how little we knew about the brain, never mind the developing brain. We only know about 5% of what we'll eventually know about the brain. So think about how much about cardiology in the 1850s. That's the relative level of understanding. And so as I was researching this and it correlated to me to the computer science field of the 50s and 60s, we had brilliant people all over the world working in it, but nobody knew what else was doing. So I fast forward 50 years and I realized that all of the breakthroughs in those fields were occurring using open source principles. Wikipedia, Linux operating system, shared knowledge is where the breakthroughs were occurring. So I started research to see who was using those principles in the field of neuroscience, and nobody was at the time. And I started a thing called the Human Brain Project, 20, 30 years ago, but Sarah Jane's going to graduate from Oxford by the time they complete the damn thing. So not being a very patient person, I started thinking to myself, what could one dad do with one child? And that's when I came up with the idea for the first time in medical history, putting all of Sarah Jane's medical records online in open source format. It had never been done before. And so that's how I basically started down this path and triggered this by initially launching the Sarah Jane Brain Foundation, which was an open source concept of basically sharing information, sharing knowledge, and that triggered on to this journey.
Wow. So I know the cliche statement when you talk about like how do you eat an elephant like one bite at a time. It seems like getting together as a community to try to, like get more of an understanding of the brain, but also like being able to bring in all of this various knowledge and then like get an understanding of how to like organize it and having worked together. There's got to be, I'm just envisioning it hasn't been linear. It may have started like very sluggish and then all of a sudden it kind of maybe started going exponential. I mean, are we on an exponential growth of the understanding of the brain right now, or is there still some major roadblocks?
Oh, there's significant roadblocks. I think we're making progress, but I still think there's significant roadblocks. And that journey, what I then basically did is I started organizing from all over the country, all over the world, and we put together one of the most robust programs to develop a system of care and a methodology to actually move this thing forward. And we organized, we had 50 state lead centers. We created a $2.9 billion national research project back during the Obama years. We got bipartisan support in Congress. I had literally over 150 bipartisan sponsors, and it just basically hit a roadblock with the bureaucracy. And it was quite troubling to understand. And I'm coming from the background of politics. In my previous life, I was Governor Pataki's finance director, so I've raised over $500 million for politicians. So I mean, I know the political system very well. But when you start entering into that sphere of actually driving change within the bureaucracy, the roadblocks are enormous. Matter of fact, I'll never forget. We helped organize, the White House did a sports concussion conference at the White House, which, to be honest with you, it was more of a PR, but fine, PR is just nothing wrong with PR. And I'll never forget, I was there, and the head of NIH at the time, Francis Collins, very tall fellow, he was there. And obviously, this guy is at the epicenter of billions of dollars of research, and everybody's always kissing his butt. And I remember walking up to him at the end of the conference, the presentation, and I walked up to him and I basically said, what you're doing for brain injury is actually despicable. And he was kind of shocked. I said, you do realize that brain injury is the leading cause of death and disability for kids and adults in this country by far. I mean, the numbers are staggering. Over 765,000 American youth enter an ER every year with a new brain injury. Over 80,000 are hospitalized. Over 11,000 die annually. Now, if you compare that, to other conditions, like there's about 56,000 new cases of HIV, about 26,000 new cases of autism. the amount of research dollars that are relatively put to it is peanuts. I mean, there's over $3 billion a year in research of HIV. There's finally moving towards $1 billion a year in research towards autism, which is wonderful. That community's done a great job in advocating. But kids, young adults with brain injuries, less than 10 million with an M in federal research dollars. So I basically pigeonholed them. I said, you know what they call that number on Capitol Hill? They call it budget dust. They don't call it. They don't even. You don't even get to speak to a congressman or a senator. You don't get to speak to a legislative director. You start talking about those type of numbers. You're lucky if you're talking to an intern. And I could tell, look in his eyes, like he couldn't believe that I'm talking to him. So I'm like I'm talking truth to power. But it was a trigger at that moment. So we put together this entire kind of top-down effort that we felt could galvanize and move this thing fast and forward. And I spent years and years and years, working Capitol Hill, trying to work the White House, and at a certain point in time, realized that that's still the option. But basically, what happened is that days, months, years were going by, and while I was certainly having an impact, I wasn't having a direct impact on Sarah Jane. And so that's when it was about 2013, is when I then pivoted and said, okay, well, I'm going to continue to push this effort as a top-down effort to try and make this happen. But in the meanwhile, I can't let more time go by. So I now need to spend time and effort building from the bottom up, right? And so that's when I created the first school for kids with severe brain injuries here in New York City. Actually launched it out of my living room with 6 kids in 2013. And we've now grown it where we have a campus in Manhattan, a campus in Brooklyn. We've expanded into DC. And my vision is that we'll have, iBRAINs all over the country, all over the world. And so if I have to, I'm going to do it from the bottom up. It's a lot easier if someone wrote me a $2.9 billion check. That would make it a lot quicker. But I saw firsthand, just the inherent roadblocks within the bureaucracies themselves, even though everybody agreed with it. I mean, I literally had Ron Paul and Jesse Jackson, agreeing on something. I mean, it was remarkable, but couldn't get it past that finish line from the DC and forward.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Well, let's start with, let's take a step back here and talk about iBRAIN.
Sure.
So I'm going to throw this up here on the screen here, talk about the website, because I've gone to this website. So iBRAIN NYC. So up on screen right now, and for those who are listening in, I have the website, and let me spell it out for you. So it's iBrainNYC.org. So iBRAINNYC.org. And then on Instagram, it's the same thing. It's at iBRAINNYC. So this is what we're talking about. There is so much information on this website. You guys have done a tremendous job, and allowing outside folks to be able to get involved. So I love the idea. I mean, granted, it's like Brooklyn, granted, it's like downtown New York, but there's also a big donation button on there. And I'm just curious that for those that talk about the grassroots movement, starting from the bottom, going up, how can those outside the area participate and help move this mission forward?
Well, I appreciate it. So in essence, when I created the school, I put on the board a single working mom with 2 other kids. If it doesn't stick to her, we don't do it. So right out of the batter's box, that single mom doesn't have $5,000 or $10,000 to pay for a special ed lawyer, because the kids have to be unilaterally removed from the public school system and placed in a private school. So as an attorney, I represented the families pro bono. And as we grew and expanded, that's when it created an entire nonprofit civil rights legal advocacy piece, which you mentioned at the outset, Liberty and Freedom Legal Group. So Liberty and Freedom Legal Group is basically a nationwide civil rights legal advocacy. We have lawyers in over 10 states around the country that represent families who have children with special education, special needs. Eventually, we'll have lawyers and legal support in all 50 states. If you go back over onto the school side, and if you visit either the website or the Instagram site, you'll see how comprehensive the program is. Every kid is a one-to-one paraprofessional. They're getting 15 to 20 hours of therapy per week, extended school day, extended school year. Every kid's getting over $200,000 worth of services per student per year. If you go back to that single mom again, she doesn't have $50,000 or $100,000 to plop down for a private school placement. So the only out-of-pocket expense for a family to enroll at our school is a $100 refundable deposit. I then stop, and all the other payments while the lawyers go and do their thing. So just as a core philosophy of mine, a family's socioeconomic status should have no bearing whatsoever on their access to a free and appropriate education. So if you look at the demographics of our student body, when you go to the website, you'll see it's not filled with a bunch of wealthy white families on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We have families themselves who are on social disability. So brain injury doesn't discriminate, nor should their access to care. And so, obviously, any type of financial support is always welcome. But the other piece of this, as I mentioned, is the long-term goal is to grow this program all over the country. So if you know of a family who has a child with severe disabilities, and they need services, have them go to our website. They connect with us. If we have a lawyer in that particular state, we can help and represent them pro bono. Everything we do is pro bono. And then eventually, if we have a core group of students in any one geographic area, we'll then go in and start growing and add an iBRAIN into that location. So over time, I expect us to have iBRAINs in all 50 states and multiple iBRAINs around the country and around the world.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. That is so exciting. So is there another one outside of the two you've mentioned? Is there another one? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. We just expanded into DC recently, so we're building that one up. And we've already made 1,000 mistakes, which is what I expected. So working out all the kinks in that expansion. But within the next 6 months to a year, we'll be in a position to be able to expand to Florida and California and Chicago and Detroit and other places around the country, Seattle as well, Colorado, places like that. The reality is, as I mentioned, unfortunately, brain injury is such a prevalent disability, and it impacts so many families that unfortunately there are a lot of kids that need our supports and services. The other thing that we're doing, we haven't done it yet, but on the iBRAIN piece, I describe it as a four-legged stool. The first leg is the school, the academy. Right now, what we've done is focus on kids with severe disabilities. Our plan in the near future is to launch a general education program that'll educate typically developing kids from pre-K through 12, and then also launch a special ed program focused on those kids that are at risk already in the juvie system, because we know based upon the research that over 80% of those kids have brain injuries or brain-based disorders, and we know they're not getting the service that they're entitled to. They're lucky if they have legal aid to keep them out of prison, never mind start advocating for their educational resources. So when you talk about the school to prison pipeline, that's your source right there. So we intend on launching a special ed program focused on that population. Obviously, it's a different profile than a child like Sarah Jane, who has a lot of physical needs. These kids have more behavioral, psychological, but they do have some physical needs as well. And then eventually these three educational programs will merge into a fully inclusive education model, which if you look in the textbooks, it's best practices. They're all full of crap. It doesn't exist anywhere in the country, never mind the world. New York City, the largest school system in the country. Kids like Sarah Jane are typically in a separate building, or maybe at best in a separate wing of the building. There's no real inclusion going on. I'm not saying it's not a program in Sweden with doing 30 kids as far as inclusion goes, but as far as the system goes, it doesn't exist. So we're going to be creating it.
It's incredible how, like the grassroots building community, one person at a time, it takes so much work, but it creates such a galvanized, impenetrable foundation, and it truly drives and moves the needle. It makes change. It truly does. And it never seems to happen as fast as we want it to, but it is tried and true. You just got to keep leaning in.
That is true. I tell the staff that work with our kids, I tell them there's a difference between what I do and what they do. As Sarah Jane's dad, it's my job and responsibility to get up every day and change the world for her. These are people who choose to do what they do every day. To me, they're like walk angels on a planet. Our OTs, PTs, speech, special ed teachers, the paraprofessionals, the music therapists. These are just amazing walk angels on a planet. And I describe them as artists, right? So imagine Picasso painting a painting, right? And he goes to dip in and get red paint, and there's no red paint in the jar. Well, you don't want Picasso going to the paint store. Not really a good use of Picasso's time, right? So I view my role and responsibility making sure there's paint, there's easels, there's paintbrush. So these artists who are just amazing people who work and do what I couldn't do what they do every day, that they have the resources and tools they need to help change the world for our kids. And it's not just in our program, but these are people all over the world that are just truly remarkable people. And that goes back to the community we're talking about. The other piece of this is that, and I thought of this when you're opening up, is that my philosophy is that things work out best for those who make the best out of the way things work out. So while what happened to Sarah Jane is and was horrific, I'm a very optimistic person. I believe that Sarah Jane will walk and talk someday. And it's my job to do everything I can to make that happen. And so, there's a reason to go calmly to the corner and cry, but that's not going to change the world for Sarah Jane. So, and I've hit many obstacles as I know you have in your journey. But what they say is that the wheel started off as a square stone and the cavemen kept on pushing it until the edge is rounded off. So sometimes we hit a bigger edge than we anticipate, but the key is to keep on pushing it forward.
Yeah. Well said. And I wanted to touch on when you're talking about the therapists and like basically, the people that are like the workers, the people that you're empowering to help, the artist really, like, as you described it. I mean, that takes me down memory lane. I mean, I remember being an inpatient. I broke my neck when I was a teenager. I used a wheelchair. I'm considered a C5-6 quadriplegic, so I'm paralyzed basically with the nipple line down. And that really rattled my world. And it was those artists that you're talking about, those therapists and those doctors and those exercise specialists and like just a laundry list of other folks that really believed in me before I believed in myself. And it wasn't like they fixed me, but they allowed me to choose to change. And it gives you kind of direction and potential, and then it's your choice to keep pushing forward. And the journey is different than what I expected. And this is kind of where I wanted to, finish things off here. When I was reading up in preparation for this call, you so beautifully put this particular question that I'm sure you get asked so many times. And the question was like, what is it like having a child with a disability? And you so eloquently put it as it pertained to travel. And your analogy to put together, which I'll have you share in a moment, but the analogy you put together, it resonated so well with me because, well, I'll let you tell the story and then I'll add a little bit thing at the end.
Well, I'm not going to take credit for it because it's a common storyline that parents who are in this situation get presented with is, the trip to Holland where you have an entire family trip, scheduled to Italy, and have everything lined up, the trip to Rome and the Vatican and all these great plans that you spend months and perhaps years even building up and scheduling, and all of a sudden you wake up and you land in Holland, and the question is that wasn't what you were planning, right? But there are beautiful things obviously in Holland, and so this goes back to trying to make the best out of the way things work out. Is that philosophy is that we can't control our entire environment. To me, we can only, to the best of our ability, control how we respond to our environment. And so you can go through life, being miserable and being unhappy, or you can try and find, the wonderful things about life. And so if anybody ever applies to work at either iBRAIN or a Living Free Move group, they'll see on every single job description, there's only one requirement that's in bold and capital, and it must have a sense of humor. And the reason being is why we're doing serious things. We can't take ourselves too seriously. And one of the single emotion that everybody that I've ever met that's come and visited iBRAIN, that they walk away with is love. They feel the love that our staff have for the kids and the kids have for the staff. I mean, these are kids who, when they come off their bus in the morning and the wheelchair and they're smiling, they're laughing, they know that they're getting prepared for a wonderful day, surrounded by people who love them, and the staff, they feel the same thing. In other words, because of the program, the way it's structured and set up, our staff spend a lot of time. I mean, our physical therapists spend 5 times a week, 60 minutes with each one of the students. There's no other program with that gets you in a public school. You get 3 times 30, right? So the level of intimacy that our staff have with our kids and our kids have with our staff is remarkable. it just fills the hallways, fills the classrooms, of anybody who visits. They really feel the love that our staff have and the kids have for the staff, and our parents obviously greatly appreciate it as well.
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, adding value, it's the name of the game.
No question about it. And as I said, the key is with our staff is that, and the way we structure it is that they're the ones who decide what the students needs. So, with all due respect to departments of education in the city or around the country, it'd be nice for them to come on board, but I really don't care if they come on board. This is why I have an entire network and of lawyers who advocate for the families and back up based upon what the therapists, the teachers, and the professionals recommend that these kids need, as opposed to what some bureaucrat may decide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes it back to the very beginning of our conversation when you are with your infant daughter and she's communicating with you like non-verbally, and you know what she needs. She's telling you what she needs, and I don't know, you're able to communicate that, and it was outside of a book, really.
And a lot of it is, parents and caregivers need to feel comfortable responding to what their instincts are.
Right.
Wow. And it works.
Well, let me put this back up on the screen. So you guys, this has been an amazing conversation. So check out iBrainNYC.org. So it's iBrainNYC.org. That's the website. Instagram, it's at iBrainNYC. So at iBrainNYC. So check that out. Boy, Patrick, I sincerely appreciate your time. This was an absolutely amazing conversation. I got a ton of value out of it. I hope everyone did too.
Thank you, Billy. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. And thank you for what you do, by the way. Sarah Jane has some of your shoes, just so you know.
Oh, love it. Love it. I got to ask, can you tell off the top of your head, like which one she has as an example?
My sister and her aunt would know. I'm not the, as you can tell, I am not the fashion person. I'm just more the practical aspect of it, but and she's had multiple, iterations over time, so, and it's really just creative what you've done with your brand. And obviously they're beautiful shoes that you guys have created for, and not just for kids like Sarah Jane, but, I think your instinct of starting with beautiful, well quality material and design, it resonates.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I mean, similar to what you guys have been talking about, it's a team effort. It's a team effort, and it's the community that drives us forward. There's no way we'd be here. There's no way we'd be here without the community. And interesting enough, there's no way we would be here if it wasn't for me having a disability. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be where I'm at if Sarah Jane didn't have the injury she had. But as I said, that's my focus is to change the world for her. And that's also why I distinguish between those people who actually get up every day and choose to do what they do. They're remarkable.
Yeah. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time, Patrick, because I know you and I could talk all day long. So here it is. This was amazing. This is absolutely amazing. And I look forward to staying in touch, my friend.
You got it. And I look forward to you visiting when you're in town.
Yes, indeed. Okay, everyone else out there, this was an awesome episode of Open Book. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll have another one again really soon. So until then, take care.
Thank you, Billy.